Yes, Toyota is usually the exception to the rule. When car experts or mechanics say they'll never buy a PHEV, they almost always add a disclaimer, unless it's a Toyota. And I get why. Toyota's hybrid and PHEV systems are generally better engineered and more reliable than most of what's out there. So this isn't all PHEVs are trash or nobody should ever buy one. It's not anti-EV, it's not pro-gas, and it's not anti-Toyota. It's me looking at how these systems are actually built, how people really use them, and what that means if you plan to own a car for 8 to 10 plus years, and deciding, for my own money in 2026, I'm out on PHEVs, even the good ones. If you're thinking, I'll split the difference, not full EV, not full gas, I'll get a plug-in hybrid, best of both worlds, you need to hear the other half of that story. I'm GearHead. I don't care what's trending, I care what breaks, what lasts, and what quietly drains your wallet over the long term. If you'd rather understand the tech instead of being the unpaid beta tester for it, subscribe, because this is exactly where most people just trust marketing and hope for the best. Let's break down why I won't be buying a plug-in hybrid in 2026. What a PHEV really is, not the sales pitch. On paper, a plug-in hybrid sounds perfect. You get an engine, you get an electric motor, you get a bigger battery you can charge, you get some electric-only range, and you get gas backup for long trips. The brochure story is best of both worlds. Mechanically, though, here's what you're really buying. You're buying almost a full gas car with an engine, fuel system, exhaust and catalytic converters, a turbo in many models, emissions hardware, cooling and lubrication systems, and often a traditional automatic, DCT, or complex power split unit. And you're buying almost a full EV with a large high-voltage battery pack, one or more drive motors, an inverter and power electronics, an onboard charger, and extra cooling loops and high-voltage wiring, all in one chassis. A regular hybrid blends those worlds with a small battery and a simpler layout. A full EV rips out the engine and all its complexity. A PHEV keeps almost everything from both and adds the weight of both. So before we even get into how they're used, you're starting with maximum complexity, maximum parts count, and maximum potential failure points. I'm not saying they can't be made reliable. I'm saying purely as a mechanical system, they are the most complicated option on the table. Complexity versus benefit, carrying two cars in one suit. Every additional system in a car costs money to build, money to maintain, weight to carry, heat to manage, and space to package. A PHEV is heavy, even compared to a normal hybrid. You're hauling a complete combustion powertrain and a large traction battery plus motors and electronics, whether you're using them or not. When you're running on gas because the battery is low, you're dragging around a big half-charged battery you're not really using. When you're running on electric, you're dragging around a metal engine block, transmission internals, exhaust plumbing, and a full fuel system that are doing nothing. By contrast, a regular hybrid runs a small battery and small motor that are fully integrated and used almost constantly. A full EV only carries what it actually uses to move, the battery, motors, and associated hardware. Can PHEVs still perform well and hit great test numbers? Sure, but in 2026, with how good full hybrids and full EVs have become, I see PHEVs mechanically as two half cars in one suit of armor. Powerful, but needlessly complex for most use cases. Real-world use, how people actually drive plug-ins. The whole value proposition of a PHEV rests on a giant assumption. You will plug it in, consistently. Ideally, every day. If you install a home level 2 charger, plug in every night, keep most trips within the EV range, and use gas only on longer journeys, then your PHEV can be fantastic on fuel. Your engine hours stay low, your gas bills shrink. But that's the ideal case. In the real world, you see a lot of this. People never get around to installing a home charger. Apartment dwellers can't install one at all. Owners get lazy and stop plugging in once the new toy feeling fades. And public chargers are busy, broken, or just not worth the hassle for a 20 to 40 kilometer top-up. So when that happens, your plug-in hybrid becomes a heavy, complex, expensive, normal hybrid, often with worse real-world miles per gallon than a well-optimized conventional hybrid because you're hauling a bigger battery that's rarely fully charged. Fleet studies in Europe have already shown this. Company PHEVs driven almost entirely on gas because drivers never plug them in, with real emissions and fuel use far above the marketing numbers. So your personal PHEV outcome depends heavily on you behaving like the perfect PHEV owner every week. I don't want a car that only pays off if I change my life to suit it. I want something efficient even when I'm just living like a normal human. The silent killer: how PHEVs treat their engines. This is the part that worries me most as a mechanic-minded person. Engines like routine. They're designed to warm up, reach stable oil and coolant temperature, burn off moisture and fuel vapors in the oil, and run through full heat cycles. In many PHEVs used as intended, the engine may sit cold most of the week. It wakes up briefly only when you floor it, climb a grade, or your battery dips. It might run for short high-load bursts, then shut off again, and oil changes get delayed because I barely use the engine. That's rough. You can get condensation in the crankcase that never fully burns off, fuel dilution in the oil, internal corrosion on surfaces that don't see regular hot cycles, and exhaust components that rarely get hot enough to work optimally. Ironically, the engine in a PHEV that's saving gas can age weirder than the same engine in a conventional car that gets warmed up and driven every day. Yes, manufacturers try to mitigate this with software, occasionally running the engine, forcing it on at times, recommending time-based services, but this is a balancing act. If you're not religious about maintenance by time, not just mileage, the engine can slowly become the neglected half of a very expensive powertrain. That's a risk I don't need if my other options are a simple hybrid where the engine runs in a more predictable pattern, or an EV with no engine at all. Battery and electronics, taking EV pain without EV simplicity. Full EVs have one major electromechanical system, the battery plus motors. No oil changes, no exhaust, no fuel system, no multi-gear automatic in most designs. PHEVs keep the big battery, the high-voltage motors, the inverter and power electronics, an onboard charger, and extra cooling loops and high-voltage wiring. All and everything essentially from an engine. All in one car. From a what-can-break standpoint, you've taken the full EV's expensive side and the full gas car's expensive side and combined them. Over 10 to 15 years, we're now asking, how does the PHEV battery age compared to a smaller hybrid pack or a full EV pack? Can I replace the pack affordably when it's old? Will anyone stock it? What happens when my aging PHEV needs both engine work and high-voltage diagnosis? How many independent shops in 2033 will really want to touch a 10-year-old PHEV versus a 10-year-old Prius or simple EV? Yes, Toyota's PHEVs like the RAV4 Prime or Prius Prime will probably age better than most because their base hybrid system is strong. If I ever made an exception, it would be there. But in 2026, looking at the entire PHEV market, I'd rather own a proven full hybrid with a smaller, cheaper battery, or a simple internal combustion engine car I can rebuild in my sleep, or a straightforward EV for city duty than the most complex blend of all three. Regulatory games. Why PHEVs look so good on paper. Here's why car companies love PHEVs, and why I'm cautious. On official test cycles, PHEVs start with a full charge. They do most or all of the test on electric power and sip a tiny amount of fuel at the end. The result? The CO2 and fuel numbers on the sticker look incredible. On a spreadsheet for regulators, PHEVs are heroes. In the real world, if owners don't plug in consistently, PHEVs burn far more fuel than the test suggests. Some studies have found real-world PHEV emissions 2 to 4 times higher than official figures, depending on the usage pattern. So PHEVs are, to a large extent, a regulatory tool for manufacturers to hit fleet emissions targets in the short term. They're a way to keep selling big, heavy, powerful vehicles while still being counted as green on paper. That doesn't automatically make them bad for you, but it does mean that a lot of their magic exists on tests and in assumptions about driver behavior, and you're paying for the added complexity that mostly helps their fleet numbers, not necessarily your long-term ownership experience. I don't love being the one funding a compliance strategy, then dealing with the fallout when that complexity ages. Weight and packaging, the hidden compromise. Physics doesn't care about marketing. Weight makes everything harder. Harder to accelerate, harder to stop, harder on suspension and tires, and harder on efficiency if you're not using all the systems perfectly. Many PHEVs are adapted from gas or hybrid platforms, with the battery stuffed under the trunk floor or rear seats, a raised cargo floor, no spare tire, and a rear suspension carrying more load than it was originally designed for in base models. Some manufacturers do a better job than others, but the pattern is space and weight compromises in a vehicle that you bought hoping it would be the ideal compromise. If I'm going to carry around massive battery weight, I'd rather do it in a pure EV designed from the ground up for that pack, or not carry it at all and stick to a lighter hybrid or internal combustion engine car I can rebuild in my sleep, or a straightforward EV for city duty, than the most complex blend of all three. So, what do I buy instead in 2026? Here's how I'd play it, based on use case. If I have a garage or driveway, can install home charging, mostly drive in town or moderate distances, and can afford it, I'd go full EV for daily use. It has fewer moving parts, no engine or transmission to maintain, and almost all of the complexity is focused in one domain, the battery and motors, instead of two. If I do a mix of city and highway, don't want to think about charging at all, and want something proven to 200,000 plus miles, I'd go with a full hybrid, especially from brands with a strong track record like Toyota and Lexus, and certain models from Honda, Ford, Hyundai, and Kia after checking reliability. They have smaller batteries, they're simpler than PHEVs, and there is way more real-world data. If I am on a tight budget or drive relatively low miles or value simplicity over tech, I'd stick with a solid internal combustion engine car with a good engine and transmission and maintain it right. That can still be the cheapest move overall. Those three lanes cover almost everyone. EV for the charging-friendly lifestyle, hybrid for the just-make-it-efficient and reliable crowd, and internal combustion for the budget and simplicity crowd. The lane I personally don't need is carrying around two nearly complete drivetrains and betting that in 10 years both will still be happy and easy to service. That's plug-in hybrids. Are PHEVs always a bad idea? No, but they're a narrow fit. There are cases where a PHEV is genuinely smart. You get huge tax incentives or company car benefits that only apply to PHEVs. Your daily commute is comfortably within the EV range, and you will plug in at home or work every day. You regularly do long highway trips and don't want to rely on charging networks at all. And you buy from a brand whose hybrid and PHEV system has a decent track record, and you're not planning to keep it into old age territory. In that scenario, you can make a PHEV work for your favor. But for me in 2026, the complexity is too high. The dependence on perfect owner behavior is too high. The long-term, high-mileage track record is too thin compared to full hybrids and EVs, and the alternatives are finally good enough that I don't need to make that compromise. Even with Toyota as the honorable exception, and if I had to buy a PHEV, it would almost certainly be theirs, I'd still rather choose a Toyota or Lexus full hybrid or a well-built EV or a dead-simple internal combustion engine workhorse than be the guy owning the most complicated drivetrain combo in the driveway. If you've made it this far, you're not just casually car shopping. You actually care what happens to these machines in 5, 10, or 15 years, and what they'll do to your wallet when the warranties are gone. That's exactly why this channel exists. Most people hear PHEV and think best of both worlds. We look under the floor pan and ask, or is it the worst of both if things don't go perfectly? If you're not subscribed, you're still stepping into EV versus PHEV versus hybrid versus gas decisions with half the story. Everyone here is slowly getting the full picture. Hit subscribe now before your next big car decision. Whether you agree with me on PHEVs or not, you're going to want this level of understanding on whatever you buy. I'm GearHead. Every drivetrain has consequences, and together we're going to decode them so you're never the one paying to be the experiment.